Jim, it's October.
Morning, Claude.
It looks like it, doesn't it?
It finally had some color.
Yep.
Lacking that cool nights, and once the cool nights started, the low 40s and high 30s or something, and the color's starting to come. And it's late, but it's...
This is the 11th, I think, of
Yep,
October.
yep.
And really no terribly hard killing frost anywhere,
No.
which is rather unusual.
Yep.
Well,
But we'll pay for it. It'll end up evening out, I think.
It always does.
Yep.
Almost everything. You look at the average, and whether it's a month's average, well, that's one thing. A year's average, that's something else. When you go to decades or a century or two's average, not much changes.
The averages are made up of extremes, and that's what an average is, I guess. So.
Yep. Well, this month, we've got to finish up, or at least certainly get into Robbo Halloran's.
Yeah, I think one of our most interesting shows. I really like seeing the trees and how they developed, and I think the audience will be too mesmerized maybe by Robbo.
And we're going to show everybody the Columbus Day, and this is actually Columbus Day, right? It's the 11th.
I think it's the 12th.
Or is it the 12th?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But they don't know either,
Close enough.
because it's not the 12th. It's some other day when we see this. So.
And you've got the Columbus Day blight right
Right.
here.
Yeah, we're looking right at it.
We're
Yeah.
going to look at it real close for
Yeah.
everybody. There it is. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? And there's your green pine tree that is turned yellow.
Dying. And it's all...
Only for a week or two.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. The first heavy wind will make that all green again as the brown needles, the yellow-brown needles fall off, and the green ones remain, and it'll be magic.
And there's a good coating on the ground there.
Underneath it, yeah.
So
And other things are happening this month, and we have our Northern Woodlands magazine, and we're both going to show off that we can read, right?
we're going to try again. I had
Okay.
some tongue twisters last
I
time.
know. That's because we didn't read it in advance.
So who's going first?
Well, why don't I go first?
Okay.
Canadian geese are flying, some of them, right? We wish
Oh.
that they would all leave, but
Some are walking?
no, some are staying.
Oh,
Some are
okay.
got lazy or something happened to the genes or something happened. Canadian geese live here year-round now, and I guess if we really have a hard winter, they might be in trouble. But I can remember last week being outside, and they were flying, you know, high elevation, honking, and those are the real wild ones that are acting like they're supposed to. But and milkweed seeds and their parachute pods have popped open, and I think every kid has thrown those around. And beavers are submerging branches next to their lodge to be eaten through the winter. It won't be the branches they eat, but the bark off the branches, and we'll see those pale or those bright white branches floating on the ponds pretty soon as they eat them and then throw them away and they float up. And everybody lives in a rural area knows that the Halloween beetles and the cluster flies are moving indoors.
Yeah. And this week, there it says, bears are especially active in the fall, eating everything they can find to store enough fat to last for the next 5 months.
Because they're not going to eat.
They're going to eat. And
Yeah.
this year they're going to be traveling more, and they're going to be eating less fatty foods because the mast crops, the nuts and things, they aren't as plentiful as they might be at times.
And so the beekeepers are vulnerable because they have stored honey, and they're going to be moving, and they're going to be in cornfields. They're going to be, it's called a feeding frenzy. They're just going to be eating as long as every part of the day as they can stay awake, trying to put on that fat to make it through the winter.
And then the last timber doodles, otherwise known as woodcocks, right? They're a migratory bird, a little bird with a long beak.
Yeah,
and,
that flies like a helicopter.
Kind of go up and then decide where they're going and take off.
Yeah.
And they go peep, peep, peep,
Yep.
and they go. And they're a migratory bird. They are hunted, but they've got to have a federal duck stamp to do that.
Yep. And they move because they're mainly a worm feeder, and if you have snow on the ground or frozen ground, then that's why they get out.
Kind of hard drilling to get out of
Yep.
down there. And we spoke about the white pines dropping their needles as they do every fall. And then what about these little guys over here?
Yeah, they're semi-hibernators too, chipmunks.
Yep.
That'll get up when it's warm and run around and get drowsy when it's cold and
And they gather up, they cache food all
Yep,
around
yep.
different places.
Yeah, and we're here at Lake Shasberry with a lot of cones from the pines and the spruces, and I can tell you that, in fact, maybe we can run and find a little cache of where the red squirrels have done the same thing. They're storing their pine cones and spruce cones in groups to live on throughout the winter. They usually find a base of a tree here and pile the things up. And
another new thing that's happening, we'll get into next month and through the winter some, is a program has become available after 30-some months of hard work, an educational program called Vermont Forests Forever, and it's on a CD-ROM, and it's an interactive computer program aimed at 5th and 6th grades. And the package is free to all educational groups, even homeschooling people, and look forward to it. I've looked at it some, and
we'll show that on.
And we'll
Okay.
make a program of it. It's very well done, I think.
Okay.
So we are going to proceed with the bonsai.
Great. Yeah. And we'll tell, Robbo will tell everybody why we pronounce it with a stress on the bone instead of the bonsai. Yep.
Let's go look at some of those.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll start with a half and half one. Yeah. And this is right outside my office, and these are Norway spruce cones, and under every little sheath there's 2 seeds with a big wing, and the wing's purpose is for the seed to be dispersed, to fly and get out from underneath its parent.
The wind can blow it quite a ways.
Yeah, because the worst place to land is be right underneath your parent and try to germinate there. You don't stand a chance. You want to be out in the sun, so I'm going to try and peel one of these out, but I'm not having, I'll start again.
We got a full one here that nobody's eaten on yet, and we got one that they've
peeled
cleaned
back
everything out.
Yeah, is
so
this no, that's not a
if
seed.
they start and just take them off one at a time on the bottom, probably holding it with their little paws. And
yeah, and this, Claude, this will be a cache of maybe 100 cones here sometime this winter. What he's been doing is eating the stuff rather than stockpile, but he's just time yet.
And there's certainly plenty of cones here.
Yes. Yeah.
Last spring, before the park opened, I picked up a big trash bag full of them, and I'm using it for kindling wood.
Well, they say, yeah, there's a lot of resin in there,
Yeah.
and that's a good fuel to get a... Can you smell it? Does it smell good?
Yeah.
No, I mean when you burn it. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I didn't get it, did I?
Well, that shows the 2, right? One on each side. Here, it's still in the sheath, but...
Yep, there's 2 wings, one there, and right at the bottom of that is a little seed. And I guess we should hire a squirrel to do this. We're not very good at it.
And that would be very high in fat content.
Yep, seeds are very high in fat, and fat is something you can store.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar you can't store that well, but fat, and for the bears and the deer and everything, they can store fat and use it later. Like we store fat, we don't use it later, it just accumulates. Well, anyway, there's 2 of them inside every one of those layers, so there's probably 500 little seeds in every cone, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he'll just sit out there, and we can pick up the old sheaths that he's peeled back. There's one right there, and there's one right there, and the whole ground is cluttered with them. And he likes to eat up. They like to have something at their back, so somebody that's going to attack them is, they got a little bit of cover, and then they can scurry right up the tree. So sometimes they'll use a rock, but most of the time they use the base of a tree, and they got an escape route to.
And when they eat, they're pretty fast at what they do. I mean, they're industrious.
Little nervous little animals.
Yep.
Yeah. And when he's up there, when these eventually fall naturally, their seeds have already dispersed. They've opened up and fallen out, and they want to get them before that. They want to get them with the seed in them. So they'll start cutting them in the this time of year, and this ground, you know, they'll fall 40 or 50 feet, and there's just a thud right here where the...
Well, that's a different
Yeah, that's
cone,
a Scotch pine.
but
yeah.
that is opened.
Opened up, and
Okay.
of no use to anybody because the seeds have already fallen out
Yep.
and dispersed, and you would never find these things on the
It's
ground.
nature's
So-
way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah,
But here, these guys are
yeah.
jumping nature a little bit, and
Yeah, they're feeding, and
Yep.
yeah. And nature's with their seed is so abundant. It's already taken care of. There's enough to germinate another plant, and there's enough for people to feed on it. So whether they're insects or mammals.
well, that's a very common question asked here in Vermont when somebody's harvesting timber. Said, well, now you replant some trees. And I always like to respond by, try not mowing your lawn for a couple of years and see what it looks like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because it just
It's ready to go.
grow everywhere.
Yep. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Robbo Holleran.
Robbo? Okay, I know Robbo.
Yes, glad to meet you. Again.
And we're here to visit Robbo because he does something only 12 people in the United States do with trees?
Well, something like that. What I do is collect naturally dwarfed trees to grow as bonsai. And bonsai is an oriental art of growing small trees in pots. And basically it's given the impression of large old trees in miniature. So there are a bunch of different techniques, but it's basically what pleases the eye and pleases the artist. Most of the bonsai that you see around is actually made from nursery stock, where it's grown from a seedling or a cutting, and it's grown on purpose to be bonsai its whole life. What I do is collect naturally dwarfed trees from the wild that are sometimes as much as 100 years or older, and they've already gained attributes of age that are hard to replicate by growing something from a seedling.
Well, Jim, we're usually used to looking up at trees.
Uh-huh.
Now, let's go over here
Let's
somewhere.
go.
We're
I'm
going to
gonna-
be looking down at them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, look at the size of this tree. That's quite a tall tree, so this must be the oldest one in here.
Is it?
Well, no. One of the oldest trees in here is this relatively short tree. And when we think about trees being young or old, a young tree tends to have a straight, slender trunk. The branches point up. The tree kind of pops right out of the ground. There's not much for exposed roots. I don't know if you can see in there, but just when you think of a tree in a forest or at the edge of a field or something, a young tree is straight. It's very regular shaped, tends to be pointed on top, and no dead sections, nothing really dramatic about it. When we think of an old tree, we have a thick trunk with a lot of taper, sometimes dead sections, exposed roots, branches hanging down. So those are all elements that we look for in bonsai to give the impression of age in a miniature tree. So a tree like this would give sort of the impression of a tree growing off the rocks, maybe leaning over a lake, something like that. This tree is in need of a little maintenance pruning, and maybe later on we'll do the pruning on this tree and get it ready for display.
Now, how old is that, Robert?
I've had this tree for 14 years. It's the tree that I've had the longest in my collection, and but the tree was probably about 60 years old when I collected it.
And where did you get that from?
This came from northern Vermont in a bog-like area.
Okay. It's very poor growing conditions.
Yes, but plenty of sunlight.
Yep. Yep. So if that was a normal, that's a white cedar.
Yep.
If that was a normal white cedar at 60, it would be almost dead, wouldn't it?
Well, a normal white cedar at 60 would be a mature saw log.
Yeah.
Maybe as big around as me.
Yeah.
And
Hollow.
60 feet tall and
Yeah.
probably hollow.
Yeah. But
Like
I mean,
me.
getting on, it would be fully mature.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But white cedar can live to be over 100 years old.
Okay. Now, how long can it live as a bonsai? So we're
Just as long.
adding your numbers together. 60 and 14 is 74. Now, how long can it live?
White cedar in nature can live to be over 200 years old.
Okay.
And as a bonsai, there's no reason they can't live as long or maybe even longer.
Okay.
As a bonsai, they're not subject to some of the same stresses and problems. An ancient white cedar tree in 200 years' time might be exposed to a fire if you have an extreme drought in one of these cedar swamps. Sometimes they burn, and cedars don't tolerate fire at all. And hurricanes. So hurricanes and wind events would probably be the main problem for a tree in nature around Vermont. Fire least so.
Yeah.
You don't have any of those in your greenhouse.
Hopefully not.
No, that's right.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
So then the other thing is the spread of decay, which is a main problem that affects old trees. So so the trees are maintained by pruning the tops to get the artistic shape that we're looking for, and pruning the roots every few years, every 2 or 3 or 4 years, depending on the age and the condition of the tree. And you're pruning the roots so that the tree always has new space to grow new roots in, because a tree is growing not only new leaves and shoots every year, but it grows new roots every year as well.
Yeah. So, if we came back here in 20 years, would this be in the same pot?
This tree balances well with this pot.
Okay.
It probably would be in the same pot. One of the things I'm going to do next is change the rock. The rock that's in here, I'm not satisfied with, and I'm going to build a set of ledges with sheets of natural granite to make that a more dramatic tree on rock look.
Have you ever been to the National Arboretum in Washington?
Yes, that's a tremendous
Isn't that
collection.
something? Unbelievable. Now, I can, just remember walking through there, and they're not for sale. In fact, they were on loan, and I think they were all from Japan.
Well, there's a wide collection there.
Is
Some
it?
of them are from Japan, some of those are owned by the Arboretum
Okay.
or loaned by local artists.
But they were in pots like this, and they would say, this is 700 years old. It was unbelievable. Beautiful trees. I mean, you talk about, I can't appreciate what some people call art, but I sure can in a bonsai tree. I mean, you just look at that tree and that bark and the roots, and like you say, the rock too. I mean, just a little decorative thing, and you look at that tree and you say 700 years old, and that's passed on from person to person to person, and you have to think about that too sometimes.
Yeah. As you know, I have a large family. We have 6 kids,
Okay.
and hopefully one of them will
Yeah.
pick up in my footsteps and take over the collection.
Yeah, because it's a real long-term hobby.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, I also sell trees,
Okay.
and what I sort of specialize in selling trees is not the sale of finished trees that are ready for display, but the sale of wild collected trees that will be premier starting stock for an advanced bonsai artist to bring along to show condition.
Now, how did you get started on this?
Well,
I mean, you said there's 12 people in the country that do it, so what happened to you?
well, there are hundreds and hundreds of people that have bonsai collections.
Okay.
It's a fairly widespread hobby. It's just fairly quiet. Most people don't know that some of their neighbors probably have a few bonsai trees on the back patio. And there are a number of bonsai businesses in the greater Boston area. There are 3 large bonsai businesses that sell a range of finished trees.
But they're not really
pre-bonsai.
finished because it's an annual...
Right. But what I mean is ready for display.
Okay.
So they're never actually finished until they're dead.
Now, do they bring those back to a person like you to annually, like a dog clipper or
They
something?
maintain them?
The people who go into the bonsai business tend to be bonsai artists that are just out of control in their hobby and have given up their day job and gone into the bonsai business.
But if you wanted a tree to enjoy yourself to look at, but you didn't want to get your hands dirty in the roots or something,
Or do the wrong thing.
can you
no.
take them to a bonsai doctor to maintain it?
Yeah, look at the size of that dragonfly. You never know what's going to pop up in the greenhouse. This is a natural habitat in here. Of course, they eat pests. They eat different kinds of bugs. Opportunity. They also bite. So maybe we can get it out, but... So where were we? How did I get started?
How did you get started, right?
I'm a tree guy.
Yeah.
I love trees, love being out in the woods. I quit the Boy Scouts because I had to come out of the woods to go to the Boy Scout meetings. So I quit the Scouts as a teenager and went on to forestry school and became a forester. So my love for trees is an integral part of why I got into bonsai. And frankly, I have to admit that the original Karate Kid movie was probably the starting point that got me exposed to bonsai as an art. And then the idea of collecting trees from the wild was intriguing to me, and of course, being out in the forest, I'm in the woods probably 150 days a year for the last 25 years. So I've seen a lot of trees and started collecting fairly ordinary stuff to try to make into bonsai when I started. And then I got exposed to some more sophisticated collectors and more sophisticated collections of trees like the National Arboretum, and seeing the possibilities, and that the possibilities in these dwarf trees is endless. And so then I started looking for the more extreme habitats and extreme trees to collect and grow as bonsai, and that's what's brought me to where I am today. And the idea of finding that super duper tree drives me to far places like the Adirondack Mountains, northern Maine, and some other places where trees grow differently. Vermont has such rich soils that we have there are very few places that have any really good trees. But for the person getting started with bonsai, there are a lot of trees to be gleaned that are good starter material right from roadside areas, underneath power lines, places like that.
So it's a stunted, undernourished tree that's the candidate. Is that a...
That's a general statement, yeah. Another category is trees that have been browsed on by deer or cattle. So
they did some of the trimming that you might do.
Exactly. But and some wild apples and hawthorn from those situations make beautiful bonsai. I don't have any here now, but I've had those in the past, and they can make exceptional bonsai. They're very difficult to transplant because in that 20 or 50 or 80 years of being browsed on,
Yeah, the roots ran.
the roots have gone and become the roots of a full-size tree.
Do you know what a bristlecone pine is?
Yes.
Now that's like a bonsai. I mean, I haven't seen one except in pictures.
4,000 years old, wasn't one of them?
10,
10,000?
right?
Well, I've heard 5, so
Okay, some
5,000 years old.
5,000
And 10
years.
inches tall.
No.
That's big, but mostly dead. It looks like driftwood with a little sprig of stuff. When you were describing with dead parts and stuff, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, some of the dry western sites are dramatic in the types of dwarf trees that they produce.
Okay.
Here we have so much moisture that our trees grow just fine. As you were mentioning earlier, there are trees this fall that show some drought stress from a dry summer if they're on a dry site. But even those trees, if you look at the growth rings of the tree, will show relatively normal growth for this year. The trees have lost their leaves, but the leaves are disposable in a sense. So we don't really have drought problems in Vermont's forest. When you get to Arizona, trees can be stunted by the lack of moisture. So but they never grow in a crowded forest. There'll be individual trees growing in the rocks. They have all the sunlight they could ever want.
Oh yeah.
And then the lack of moisture will affect the growth of the tree. So the bristlecone pines, the ones that are quite old, are shaped like a giant bush, as you say, sometimes mostly dead with one little live section on them. And but of course there are many bristlecone pines that are only 50 years old or 75 years old that might be suitable for bonsai. It's very important though to make sure that if you're collecting wild trees that you have permission from the landowner. And of course I don't recommend anybody who's inexperienced trying to collect a really exceptional tree, because there are specific skills to collecting trees.
These shapes here, are there terms for a certain style of that you're trying to create?
Yes. The easiest one to explain, this one's not really, let me bring this around to you so you can see it here. Now the trees also have a front, and this one we're gonna be pruning this one later if we have enough time. But there's a style called a formal upright, and this is probably the better front here, full of weeds and whatnot. A formal upright has a central stem that's vertical, and then it will have evenly placed branches on the left and the right, and you can see it really does look like a old tree in miniature, and that's artistically pleasant. Take my hands away so you can.
Dramatic taper on those.
Yes.
If you didn't have the scale of the camera in your hand against it and everything, in the right setting, that could be a 4-foot diameter tree, 150 feet tall.
Right. So formal upright is about the easiest one to describe. I'll get that out of the way. Then this would be called a slanting style. But there's also a style that emphasizes the exposed roots. So this is both an exposed root style and a slanting style. We mentioned formal upright. Then there's informal upright. This tamarack in the back here is an example of informal upright, where it's not straight up and down, but it's not really slanting dramatically. Informal upright is almost it's a wide used term. There are some specific rules about branch placement, but those rules are frequently broken or stretched.
They have wire on there.
Right. One of the main tools we use for artistically shaping the trees is wiring the branches, and that allows you to bend the branch. And you can see there are wires wrapped around, and then wires that actually pull these branches down. And then after a growing season or two, you take those wires off,
Because
and the branch. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then you would take the branches off, and take the wires off, and the branch will stay more or less where you've put it. And then you might wire. Once you get the main branches shaped the way you want to, then you might wire the fine branches to develop specific shapes.
This looks like it could be a finger torture tool or something. Is that?
Yeah, this is a medieval torture device.
Let's use it on Claude.
Claude would be a good candidate for this. So this is called a branch bender, and would be put on. Of course, we should have had a nice branch figured out to use for it, but this would be put on and gradually tightened.
What does gradually mean now?
Well, over the course of a couple of weeks, you tighten it a couple of turns each day to get the bend that you want into a branch. And then you leave it on there for several months. Oh, that's going to break, Claude. That's flexibility rating of 0. You tighten this up. Well, let's not use that. Let's use a tree. We have plenty of trees here. Here's a nice straight tree.
This is a
tamarack, or larch, eastern larch. Nice and straight.
That doesn't look old though.
No, this is not a real old one. This is a nice beginner tree. I do some beginner classes where we teach people about bonsai.
You do?
Yeah.
Where do you do that?
Sometimes right here. I've done them at different nurseries. around the state, and I've also done a nice series of classes at the Fletcher Farms School of Arts and Crafts up in Ludlow. So the nice thing about these larches is they're very flexible, and they have nice branch placement, some dead branches, and then you would take a tree like this in the course of the class, and like we said, there are different elements of the bonsai. With the young tree has branches pointing up, so you wire the branches so they hang down. You might put a curve into it, and that's what the branch bender does. So let's show you how the branch bender works. These finer parts here can be bent with wire, but the thicker part down here really wants to be bent with something more substantial.
Robbo, while you're doing that, what is the oldest bonsai tree?
The oldest one I've ever seen was claimed to be 900 years old. It was a ponderosa pine, again a collected wild tree, and was quite impressive.
I bet it was. And it was in a pot that you could pick up.
It was a big pot.
Yeah, okay, but
but two of us could pick it up.
Two of us.
And there are trees. There's a Japanese term for a two-man tree, a three-man tree, and a four-man tree.
Okay.
For large bonsai.
Okay.
I've occasionally had some.
And what was it? If somebody wanted to buy that, or somebody wanted to sell it, what are we talking about? What's the most expensive bonsai tree?
I've heard
These
of
are guy
trees
questions.
that were
The biggest, fastest, smallest.
right. I've heard of trees in the 5 and 6 figure category.
5 and 6. Okay.
So the most expensive, most valuable tree I ever sold was $1,500. So here's the branch bender at work,
Okay.
and you can see that it makes a nice dramatic bend there. Then you might put another bend up here.
And this would set after how much? A couple weeks.
Couple of months.
Couple months.
Here, let me sneak
would-
by you since we're looking at the shaping process.
You would make the bend all at once or over a period of time?
I've just gotten it started, and then in another week or so, you might put a few more turns and put another bend to it. Here's a tree that's same kind of tree, a young larch that's been begun the styling process.
What is this? A copper wire?
Yep, that's the traditional bonsai wire is a copper wire, but currently we use an aluminum wire with a copper coating, with a copper coloring on it. It's not actually copper, but it looks like copper, which is the traditional.
So you're just trying to hide it. You're
trying to hide it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The copper is a nice color for the aluminum would be more distracting.
Yeah,
The copper is traditional, but the copper actually can damage the tree.
oh, it can.
Copper is bad for trees.
Yeah.
So here's a tree that's beginning to be styled. You can see some wires on it. Getting that main trunk into the shape that you're looking for is really the first place to start. Then the most common mistake that people make in the transition from a starter tree to a display bonsai is to try to get it into the pot a year too early or 2 years too early. It takes several years to go from here to here. So, so the next step here would be to do some more fine training to the top, and then also next year I will be repotting this tree and pruning the roots, getting them ready to go into a bonsai pot. So what you're trying to do is develop the fine fibrous roots and get rid of the large woody roots, and you can't do that all at once. And that's the most common mistake people make when they're trying to put it into a bonsai pot when it's not quite ready. So I don't know how's the contrast there.
So the concept of like the tap root on a tree, I mean, a tree has to anchor itself or it's going to blow over. A lot of those anchors are removed, and just the delicate feeder roots is what
Yeah,
that you try to keep
well, you have
encouraged?
a mat of those roots, a web. So you have an extensive root system in the small pot. The one of the important elements, I'll just get these out of the way. One of the important elements in the artistic aspect of the bonsai is the balance of the tree and the pot. And really, when you have a large tree in a small pot, it gives a very dramatic look. Here's a tree that really has a very dramatic look, and part of it is the relatively small pot, the feeling of imbalance. We started to talk about the names of the styles. This is a style called bunjin, or literati, and it's a very dramatic style. It's hard to quantify, like an informal upright or a formal upright. There are certain rules. The bunjin is a very dramatic artistic style. This is an old jack pine that's probably 75 years old or maybe older. And then there some of the different sort of rules with bonsai. The bunjin is almost always in a round pot. So yes, you have a very limited root system. The trees need to be watered frequently, 2 or 3 times a week. If they're out in bright sunlight, then sometimes every day. One little trick is that sometimes the trees are actually wired into the pot. You can see some wires on the bottom there.
Is that to stop it from?
That stabilize the tree in the pot, keep it from falling over.
Okay.
So there are all little common sense tricks. It's a gardening. It's a combination of gardening and sculpture. The skills, people say, oh, I have a black thumb, I can't grow bonsai. If you have a black thumb, then you can't grow bonsai. But if you can grow tomatoes, you can probably grow bonsai.
So you're really not trying to grow a tree, as someone would think. You're trying to shape and maintain and configure the.
Exactly.
We got to talk about this tree while we're here too.
Okay.
All right. Why is this tree here?
Well, a dear friend of mine had to move, and he had these beautiful ginkgo trees. This is Gingko Biloba. I believe they're from Asia. And he brought me 4 of them, and I gave one to somebody else. I have 3 left. Gingko Biloba, the 2 lobes of the leaf. It's a unique tree. It doesn't have any relatives like birch trees. You have 4 different kinds of birches that grow commonly here in Vermont and 40 more around the world. Ginkgo, there's only 1, and they're kind of neat because the fossil record shows them unchanged.
And it's also a missing link. It's a link. This tree was theorized before anybody found it.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
Well, it's a good story.
It's a good story. Now, as far as bonsai goes, I was given 4 of these. I have 2 big ones left and gave 1 away. So what happened to the 4th one? Jim, why don't you reach behind you and get that other little pot over there?
I feel kind of nervous about it.
That's okay.
You drop it, you bought it.
Yeah.
So here's a tree that this was 4 feet tall when I started, and I wanted to make a bonsai out of one of the ginkgos. Selected one that had 2 stems growing off of the main trunk. Cut one of the stems off. If we turn it around, you can see the scar. Here's the scar from the other stem. And that'll eventually grow over and seal over. So now we're looking at the front of the tree, and it's a little unruly. But so I had this tree that was 4 feet tall, and pruned it down and started bending it into shape. And the tree actually broke. I was going to make it about this tall, and it broke right off right here. And didn't allow me to put the other curve into it that I was going to. But it's actually going to make a better bonsai because it broke. It sprouted these new shoots all along it, which will eventually be wired. These are not very flexible right now, so if I really torque it over, it's going to snap right off. but this will make a beautiful branch out here, and we'll grow a new apex with one of these other branches. So you can see the nice stem and the vigorous growth all over the place.
The leaves are bigger than the leaves on the other ones. Is that because of the stress that was put in it? Or
Well,
just-
I think it's because when the tree was pruned off, right, look at the size of that. When the rest of the tree was pruned off, the roots are still, even though I've pruned the roots down and put them into a bonsai pot, there's a lot of vigorous energy in the roots that pushed it into this new growth, and the sprouts on this are much more vigorous than the growth on the existing large tree. You know, sometimes if you mow the trees at the edge of a field with a bush hog, you've got, you know, normal growth on those trees, but then you mow them with a bush hog, the next year they might grow 5 or even 10 feet in just 1 year because of that vigorous root system. So many of the regular principles that apply to trees apply to bonsai just as well. Many of the gardening principles that apply to bonsai, and then the artistic aspects of creating a shape that's pleasing to the eye is one aspect.
The species that you have collected yourself personally are what kinds?
Well, pretty broad list. What I have mostly right now are the larches, or tamarack we call them here, the jack pine, a few white cedars. The ginkgo is a little odd; it doesn't grow around here. But the other trees that I've collected: wild apple, hawthorn, elm, red cedar, white pine. What are some? Black spruce, white spruce, hemlock, and buckthorn.
Hemlock should make a pretty tree, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but hemlock is difficult to
Oh,
collect.
that's a dainty tree.
It's a nice tree for bonsai.
Right.
It's a difficult tree to collect because it's usually growing in the shade, and the dwarfed ones would be dwarfed because they're in the shade. And hemlock, as you know, survives in the shade for even 100 years, and then can respond and grow as a timber tree. But the tree growing in the shade doesn't have the energy to survive the transplanting.
Transplant, yeah.
So.
Well, we're in the fall right now, headed toward winter, and trees do certain things when winter comes in order to survive and things. And are these capable of surviving, or they need your help?
Well, what I collect for bonsai are the native temperate trees that require a winter dormant period. So these trees have to go dormant and be dormant through the winter. A common mistake that people make with bonsai trees, they try to keep them indoors for the winter. They don't go dormant, and then they don't survive. When you, if you were to take these trees from their dormant condition in the winter and bring them in for your Christmas dinner for a centerpiece and leave them indoors for 4 or 5 hours, even that might kill them. So what I do with the trees is my trees are all outside. This greenhouse is unheated. It's left open and has some airflow, but it protects the trees from wind and snow and that sort of thing. And this is a special plastic that does not change light into heat. It's kind of a translucent, thick white plastic. If you use the clear plastic that you normally see on greenhouses,
It'd be hot.
it would be hot in here. Today you couldn't hardly bear standing in here.
Yeah. And then when the sun went down, it'd be dramatic change.
Right. Right. So this is a special plastic that's used for this type of application that doesn't heat up in the sun and doesn't really hold much heat at night either. So you end up with close to ambient temperatures that you would have outside. So most of my bonsai come inside. They'll be shoved underneath the benches and stacked up and well watered when I put them away. and then I'll cover them with a tarp because they don't need sunlight. They need to be protected from drying out.
Yeah.
So really, a tree like this, that's in a very small pot, is at some risk of drying out, whereas a tree that's a little less dramatic in its balance of pot, a tree in a larger pot would be less at risk of drying out.
Now, what's that soil problem?
Well, I use some different soils for different kinds of trees and in different conditions. The jack pines, for example, come from very dry habitats, and so they want to have a very well-drained soil. Now, all the trees in general need a well-drained soil because it's the air in the soil that keeps the roots healthy. But the jack pines come from a particularly dry habitat. They're very tolerant of drought conditions, and they're happiest in a well-drained soil. And so this soil is made of mostly crushed rock, crushed granite, with a little bit of peat, and
Imagine the chemistry's got to be pretty exact too, doesn't it?
well,
I mean, you can't be too good to...
yeah, you don't want to give these a lot of limestone. Some of my trees will have a little bit of marble, crushed marble in the soil, which is basically limestone. And for example, the white cedars like to have some calcium. So they would have some crushed marble in the soil. The tamaracks tend to have more peat. And I also use sometimes wood chips, bark, shredded bark, and vermiculite, sometimes perlite, in different mixes for different kinds of trees. And then the difference between a freshly collected tree and a tree that is fully established.
Boy, winter's coming, I can tell. My belly's getting awful hungry. Yeah, I gotta get some food. It's that time of the year to start stocking up food so I can last throughout the winter. But I tell you, you can tell in the woods it's getting awful cold. Well, what are those I see over there? That looks like an apple tree, and there's like a great big old orange berries on the ground. I think I'll go over and I'll take a look at those. Here's that apple tree, but I don't know, I don't see any apples. Oh, I bet that old Bucky the deer was here and he cleaned this out because he gets hungry for this time of year also. Yeah, I bet that's what happened because there aren't any apples here at all. You know, I don't even think he left any on the ground. What's a poor bear to do? Oh, I know. I'll go and check out those big old orange berries over there. Hey, wait a minute. What kind of berries are these? These are the biggest berries I've ever seen. Well, they're even bigger than my head. Not that I have a big head, but wow. And it sounds like I'm by the ocean. I know I'm not by the ocean, but it sure sounds that way. And what's that way over there? It looks like somebody's gonna cook some of those berries. Or maybe I'll go over and see what's going on over there. Maybe they taste better when they're cooked. Wow! What are you? You're one of the ugliest things I've ever seen. You frighten me. But at any rate, could you tell me what these big orange things are, and how are you cooking them there? And how good are they anyway? You don't seem to want to talk to me at all. Well, I'll just go and find out on my own. You're an old knothead, you know that? This is the strangest place I've bumped into yet. Look at that. There's humans over there, and looks like horses, but they don't seem to be going anywhere. And the guy almost fell over. The horse must have kicked him. And there's a huge giant guy over there. And there's more of these orange berries around the place. And oh, now I see why it sounded like I was by the ocean. There's cars over there. I gotta be real careful of them. But there's all sorts of things. Let's go and look at this a little closer. Go and ask this guy over here. what's going on around here. Hey, excuse me, sir. What's going on here? Oops, I just got my foot stopped on. Excuse me, sir. What's going on here? Why, you're nothing but an old sockhead, you. What is this? I don't understand. We bears don't understand a lot of these things that these humans do. It's interesting, though. Ooh, boy. I think I found my cave for the winter. This is nice and warm, except that the back door doesn't seem to be too closed, too tight. Yeah, this would be a nice cave. Well, maybe it's really not a cave. And is that somebody on top of my cave? Be a good place to hibernate. What is that? Is that a fox? It's not a fox. It's a hay bale. Yeah, we bears like to sleep by hay bales. Yeah, they're pretty good. They keep you nice and warm. Maybe I'll take the one and put it up behind me here. This would be a great place to hide. Yep, good place. Now go get something to eat. Well, they're awful colorful. I wonder if they're good to eat. Don't know how they smell. If they smell good, they must be good to eat. Well, they don't smell too good at all, as a matter of fact. In fact, I don't smell at all. Well, maybe I'll take a little sample bite and see if they're good. Wow, I don't particularly like these. No, I think I'll go and I'll look more at those orange things, whatever they are. They might be tasty. I don't know yet. Nobody's told me. Well, whatever these orange things are, they sure are hard. And what is that? He's humongous. Yeah, he's got a smile on his face, though. But it's a giant. I must be in the land of giants. Oh, I might be in trouble. Well, he seems friendly enough, though. And who's that little guy next to him? He seems friendly, too. But none of these guys are talking too well. They're not very sociable. Seeing humans do this, they ride horses. Come on, boy, giddy up, come on. Giddy up, old boy. Doesn't seem to want to go anywhere. Don't understand this at all. What is wrong with this place? Nobody talks to me, and the horses don't. Wait a minute. I think I know what this is. This must be that special time of year, harvest time. That's it, and that's what I want to do. I want to harvest some of this food. Come on, boy, giddy up. We'll keep on trying. There's this bunny over there. Yeah. Boy, I'm telling you, these horses are something else. I think I'm going to fall off. Oh, no. Over there's a giant spider. Oh, don't get caught in his web. Oh, too late. That guy got caught in his web. That'll teach him. What are those ghosts and goblins? There's a ghost up there. And there's an ugly old witch, too. Boy, this place is sort of spooky. I don't know if I want to hang here too much longer. I haven't even had anything to eat yet. Well, these guys are doing it. Even though the sign says no fishing, maybe I can have a little bit of luck doing some fish. Getting some fish, because I'm real hungry. Let's see what I get. Looks like I got a bite. What have I got? Pull it up. Let's see what I got. A shoe? Oh, I can't eat shoes. Boy, I hope they have better luck than I do. I think I'll walk on down the road here and see what I have. Ooh, this is the only thing that's really moving around here. Look at him go. He's going to fly away, huh? He's laughing, too. I don't get it. What does it mean, 2 ounce? Is it OZ per ounce? Oh, I get it. It's the yellow brick road. We'll follow the yellow brick road. Oh, who are these people? Why, it looks like a scarecrow and a tin man and a little girl. Is that a lion? Oh, no. Hey. Oh, I'm not good at reading, but it's something out. Oh, must be this is the way out. That's it. Oh, let's see. He was here, now he's gone. Stole a pumpkin from our farm. Oh, that's what these orange things must be. Pumpkins. What does that say here? I, Snare, came to Vermont to hunt a hare, but he did meet a big, what's that? Mad bear? Oh no, I'm not mad. A little crazy maybe, but I'm not mad. Look at that, I gotta look upside down sideways to see what I'm reading. And there's a shovel, and what does it say? Who's next? Well, I hope it's not me. Maybe it'll be Claude. Wow, look at all these things. He's a jogger. While running the back road, he met a logger. He would not move, and the logger didn't bother. So now he's under. Look at that, his feet are sticking up out of the ground still. Oh, what's this? Butte Hill, Vermont style. Came to Vermont to enjoy the view, the sights, take a gander, stayed too long and froze to that. No one here lies a flatlander. Oh, that thing's really moving there. He's still laughing. He must be having a great time in the wind. Oh, somebody lost their head. Ooh, there's a black cow. I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here. Yep, that's what it says. This way out. And trespassers will be hurried. Hurried, buried. Buried. No, it says keep out. Trespassers will be buried. Oh, I'm not going to trespass. I'm leaving. Oh no, this poor guy got buried by all the pumpkins. He either ate too many or they all fell down upon him. I don't know. Hey, anybody in there? Anybody in there? I can smell somebody's in there. There's his hand. And there's the feet. But I don't know where he is. Oh, hello. Anybody down in there? Well, I gotta tell you, buddy, this is sort of a neat place. I mean, you have a little bit of everything here. This is a nice place to be this time of the year. Well, you've got people riding bicycles, and you've got people mowing pumpkins, I guess that's what you call these things. And a guy over there with, I don't know what he's doing with that umbrella, but it's not doing him much good. And you have more people playing or riding bicycles, and a guy playing golf. Boy, I'm telling you, this is like a little town here. And what else behind me? You got a family getting their pumpkins, getting ready for what? Halloween? Oh, you have a lady taking care of her sheep. Yep. Oh, I see there's another lady. Is that Mother Goose? I see some geese there. I guess that's what those are. And then you say, what? Oh, over there's the family getting their pumpkins for Halloween, whatever Halloween is. And then there's a witch hanging out in the shed behind them. You say they better look out. Oh, I see that. Yeah. Well, I gotta tell you, this sure is an interesting place, buddy. Yep. Well, been good talking with you, and we'll see you maybe next year. There's a what next to me? Oh, witch what? What witch? Witch? You're right. And she's got what in a stew? I think I'm gonna go now. Why, this nice kind old lady asked me if I'd like to take a nice hot bath before I hibernate for the winter. Well, I thought that was a nice idea. That was very friendly of her. And to take a nice look. This water's getting awful hot though. Oh, wait a minute. That's that witch that he was telling me about. Let me out of here. I don't want to be in this hot water. No, let me out of here.